My name is Emily Shaw, and the moment I told my parents I was pregnant, they looked at me like I'd just destroyed everything they ever cared about. At 19, I wasn't asking for a celebration. I just wanted a sliver of grace. Instead, I got disowned in the same kitchen where they once baked me birthday cakes. What they did next almost ruined my life. Have you ever been punished just for telling the truth? Tell me in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. I know I'm not the only one who had to grow up fast the moment her family turned their backs. Now, let me take you back to the night everything changed. The kitchen light was too bright, too white. It made everything sharper, the edges of the table, the wrinkles deepening around my mother's mouth, the trembling in my own hands. I had planned what to say for 3 days, rehearsed every word. But now my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Mom, Dad, I'm pregnant." Silence, thick and immediate, fell across the room like a dropped curtain. For half a second, I thought maybe they hadn't heard me. That hope died when my mother's mouth pressed into a thin, bloodless line. "You've brought shame to this family," she said flatly, as if she'd been waiting for an excuse to say those exact words. I swallowed hard, blinking back the burn behind my eyes. "I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you should know. You thought we'd be proud." My father's voice cracked like a whip. "You think this is something to announce like it's good news." "No, My voice wavered, and I hated how small it sounded. "I just thought you'd still love me." Dad's hand came down on the kitchen table with a force that made me jump. The plates rattled. So did my bones. "You're 19, Emily, 19. You don't have a job, you live under our roof, and you expect us to help you raise a child." "I didn't say that," I whispered. His eyes were wild. "Then what did you think would happen?" "I didn't know. That they'd be mad, sure, disappointed. But I had hoped there would still be space for me to exist in their lives. I had hoped the people who raised me would want to help me, not cast me out like garbage." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my younger brother, Noah, standing frozen in the hallway. His face was pale, mouth slightly open. He looked 12 again instead of 16. My mother finally spoke, each word like a slap. "Pack your things. You can stay tonight. But by morning, I want you out of this house." "Mom, out!" The finality in her tone chilled me more than the winter wind clawing at the windows. I looked at my father, who crossed his arms and stared at the wall, jaw clenched. Noah hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. "I have nowhere to go," I said, more to the room than to anyone in it. "That's your problem now," my father snapped. "Actions have consequences." I nodded slowly, numbness beginning to settle over me like snow. I didn't argue. What would have been the point? My parents had made their decision before I even opened my mouth. Maybe before I even knew I was pregnant. I packed in silence. 1 duffel bag. A hoodie, jeans, the few clothes I could grab from the closet. No time for my sketchbooks or the old photos tucked into drawers. I left behind the teddy bear I'd had since I was 6 and the shelf full of books I used to escape to when life at home got too cold. At the front door, Noah was still there, eyes glassy. "You really leaving?" I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek. He stepped forward, handed me a $20 bill from his wallet. "In case you need gas." My throat tightened. I hugged him fast and hard. "Take care of yourself, okay?" "I'll try," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Then I walked out the door. The air hit like ice, but I kept moving. My car, an old Honda with a cracked windshield, coughed to life. I didn't cry, not yet. But as I turned the corner out of the neighborhood, the weight of everything, what I lost, what I had to become, settled on my shoulders. I was alone, or so I thought. The drive to Brandon's apartment felt longer than it really was, the road stretching like some endless punishment. I had barely spoken when I called him, just 3 words. They kicked me out. He didn't ask for details, just said, "Come here." I parked in the shadow of the old brick complex, engine ticking as it cooled. For a moment, I couldn't make myself move. My fingers stayed frozen on the wheel. I didn't want Brandon to see me like this, shaking, broken, humiliated. I wanted to be strong, the girl who faced her parents' rejection and kept her chin high. But strength wasn't something I had left. Not tonight. The door opened before I knocked. Brandon stood there barefoot in a t-shirt, eyes wide when he saw my duffel bag. "Oh my God, Em!" He pulled me into his arms before I could even speak. That was it. The dam broke. I buried my face into his chest and sobbed loud, ugly sobs that made my ribs ache. He didn't say a word, just wrapped his arms around me tighter and rocked us gently back and forth. My tears soaked into his shirt. I felt like I was falling apart in the safest place I'd ever known. "I'm sorry," I mumbled between gasps. "Don't you dare apologize," he said into my hair. "Not for this, not ever." We stood like that for a long time. When he finally pulled back to look at me, his eyes were glassy too. "Did they really throw you out?" I nodded. He let out a long, angry breath, running a hand through his curls. "Jesus, your parents are—" He stopped himself. "You don't deserve that, you hear me? You don't deserve any of that." "I don't have a plan," I whispered. "We'll make one." I wish I could say the fear vanished then. That love fixed everything. But it didn't, not right away. We sat on his old, sagging couch, legs tangled together under a faded blanket. I told him everything. How my mother's voice didn't even tremble when she said the word shame. How my dad slammed the table like I'd betrayed him personally. How Noah just stood there, silent, like part of him broke with me. Brandon listened. He held my hand. And when I cried again, he didn't flinch. "I swear to you," he said softly, "you won't go through this alone, not for 1 second." That night I slept in his bed while he took the couch. I offered to switch, begged him even, but he just shook his head. "You're carrying our future," he said with a sad little smile. "You need the bed more than I do." The next morning, the plan started to take shape. Over lukewarm coffee and a stale cinnamon roll he swore was still good, he called his grandmother. "Doris," he said, putting the phone on speaker. "I need a favor, a big one." Doris's voice came through, warm and no nonsense. "You're not in jail, are you?" "No," he chuckled. "But Emily, she's well, her folks kicked her out. She's pregnant and we don't have much room here." There was a pause. Then Doris said, without missing a beat, "You both pack your bags and come here. I've got a spare room and I won't hear another word about it." I blinked, stunned. "She doesn't even know me." "She knows me," Brandon said, "and that's enough for her." 2 hours later, we were pulling into a quiet street in a town I'd never even heard of, just outside Dayton. The houses were old but tidy, each yard neatly trimmed, like the neighborhood itself refused to give up on dignity. Doris's bungalow sat at the end of the street, a squat little house with navy blue shutters and wind chimes singing softly in the September breeze. The moment she opened the door, I knew I was somewhere safe. She was in her 70s, short and round with silver hair in a perfect bun and eyes like polished walnut. She wore a house dress and slippers and smelled faintly of Vicks and cinnamon. She took one look at me and her expression softened. "You must be Emily." She opened her arms. "Come here, sugar." I didn't hesitate. She hugged me like she meant it, tight, warm, grounding. "Well," she said, stepping back, "let's get you settled, your family now." That night, I lay in a real bed, under a handmade quilt that smelled like lavender and wood smoke. The room had lace curtains and old furniture that creaked with history. It wasn't mine, but it felt like home. For the first time in days, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't lost. I was found. Doris never pushed, but somehow she always nudged just enough. It started over a cup of cocoa, the kind she made with milk and a pinch of cayenne to wake up the soul, she said. We sat across from each other at her tiny round kitchen table, a crocheted runner between us and the faint ticking of a wall clock above the stove. "You two plan on getting hitched anytime soon?" she asked casually, as if she were asking about the weather. I nearly choked on my sip. Brandon looked up from buttering toast. "Grandma." "Oh, I'm not judging," she interrupted, hands raised. "I just think when you're building a life together, it helps to lay down the foundation. A name, a vow, a little ceremony to seal what your hearts already know." I was silent for a moment. I didn't even think that was possible right now. "Well, sugar, you've got love. That's more than a lot of people starting out." She smiled kindly. "The rest, we can piece together." That's how it began. A quiet idea blooming between 3 cups of cocoa and a softly humming sewing machine. The next day, Doris brought down a dusty plastic box from the attic. Inside, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, was a length of creamy white fabric with little embroidered violets stitched into the edge. "Bought this years ago," she said. "Planned to make a dress for my daughter, but she never asked for one. I think it's waited long enough." I touched the fabric gently, afraid it would disappear if I blinked. "Are you sure?" Emily, I've never been more sure of anything. Every evening for a week, she worked by the window in the living room, her fingers moving with the ease of someone who had stitched 1,000 hems in her life. I sat nearby, reading baby books or writing thank you cards to no one in particular, and we talked about her late husband, about Brandon's childhood, about the weight and wonder of being a mother. "You remind me of myself at your age," she said once, pinning the bodice to form. "Only braver." On the morning of the wedding, the sky was pale and quiet, the air still holding the breath of early October. Doris helped me into the dress like a mother would. She brushed my hair, twisted it into a loose braid, and pinned in a little violet clip that matched the embroidery. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the girl staring back, tired, yes, but glowing. Anchored. Whole. Brandon waited in the living room, adjusting his tie for the 100th time. He wore slacks and a shirt I didn't even know he owned. When he saw me, he just froze. "You look like everything," he whispered. The county courthouse was small, nestled between a diner and a florist that always smelled like lilacs and sugar. We stood before a judge in a quiet room with worn carpet and gold-painted trim, Doris standing to the side, her hands clasped tight like she was holding the sky still. The vows were short, simple. But when Brandon looked into my eyes and said, "I choose you every day, every season, no matter what we face," I felt something inside me finally click back into place. We signed the papers. The judge smiled. And just like that, I was a wife. Back at Doris's house, the backyard had been transformed into a little wonderland. Brandon had strung fairy lights through the trees the night before, and a few of Doris's neighbors, mostly folks from her church, had brought folding chairs and covered dishes. There was a lemon cake from the bakery down the road, deviled eggs, sweet tea, and an old speaker playing music from Doris's record collection. It wasn't the wedding I'd imagined as a little girl, twirling around in bedsheets pretending they were veils. It was better, because this wasn't about fairy tales or fancy pictures. This was about building something real with someone who stood beside me when everyone else walked away. It was about Doris's kind eyes as she toasted us with sparkling cider, her voice cracking as she said, "You've already shown more love and courage than most people twice your age." As the sun set, Brandon and I danced slowly under the twinkling lights, my head on his shoulder, the baby growing inside me, a quiet heartbeat between us. And for the first time since my parents turned their backs, I felt not just loved, but chosen. The rain started that afternoon, soft at first, like a whisper across the roof. By midnight, it had become a steady rhythm, a hush over the house as if nature itself was holding its breath. That's when the first contraction hit. It wasn't cinematic, no water breaking in a grocery store or frantic rush to the hospital. Just a slow tightening, a pressure that made me sit up in bed and blink through the darkness. I timed the next one, then the next. By 2 a.m., Brandon was lacing my boots with trembling hands and grabbing the hospital bag I'd packed a week too early, thinking I'd be prepared. I was. Doris stood in the doorway, already dressed, her eyes sharp despite the hour. "I'll follow behind," she said, pressing a warm hand to my back. "And don't worry, sugar, you've got this." I wanted to believe her. The hospital in our small Ohio town wasn't much, but the nurses were kind and efficient. By the time they wheeled me into a delivery room, the contractions were strong enough to steal my breath. Brandon stayed by my side, his hand locked with mine, his forehead damp with worry. "You're doing amazing," he whispered every few minutes, even when I was snarling like a wild animal. Hours passed. Pain came in waves. The rain kept falling. And then she was here, Lily, tiny, wrinkled, loud, perfect. Brandon sobbed the second he saw her. Not the quiet, masculine tears he usually reserved for emotional movies, but full, unguarded crying like something sacred had broken open inside him. He held her like she was glass and gold all at once, and when he looked up at me, I saw it, the moment he became a father. "You did it," he said, brushing my hair off my sweaty face. "She's here." I couldn't speak. My body was hollowed out, my mind foggy, but even in that haze, I felt it, the shift. The snap of a cord that tied me to a life I could never go back to. Everything was different now. A nurse tucked Lily into a blanket and placed her on my chest. She was so warm, so soft, her tiny fists curled like she was ready to fight the world. I whispered her name. She blinked, and just like that, I belonged to her. We stayed in the hospital 2 days. Brandon barely left the room, except to grab snacks from the vending machine and text Doris updates every few hours. When she came to visit, she brought soup in a thermos and a lullaby that made the nurses pause outside the door. She sat by my bed and stared at Lily like she was a miracle. "I'll tell you something, Emily," she said quietly, tucking the blanket tighter around my sleeping daughter. "You are already a better mother than yours ever bothered to be." Her words stunned me, not because they were cruel, there was no venom in Doris's voice, but because they rang with truth. "You think so?" I asked, suddenly shy. "I know so." That night I didn't sleep. Not really. I watched Lily breathe, counted her fingers again, memorized the curve of her nose and the way her lips puckered even in dreams. I thought about what I wanted to give her: safety, yes, love, of course, but more than anything, a home she never had to earn, a place where her worth wasn't measured by obedience or reputation. When we brought her home, the rain had stopped. The sky was silver, the air smelled like wet leaves and firewood. Doris had put a sign in the yard. "Welcome, baby Lily." The bungalow felt smaller somehow, but full, like the walls had stretched to hold this new heart among us. That first night, Brandon rocked Lily to sleep while I cried quietly in the bathroom, not from fear, not even from exhaustion, but from awe. I'd been thrown away. And still I made something beautiful. Somewhere between bottle warmings and midnight lullabies, our life began to take shape. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in quiet ways that didn't announce themselves until we looked back and realized we were okay. Maybe even happy. Brandon started working longer shifts at the auto plant in town. The job was hard, hot in summer, freezing in winter, but he never complained. And when they offered him a supervisor position 3 months after Lily was born, he came home with grease on his hands and tears in his eyes. "I can finally breathe," he said, holding the letter like it was a diploma. "We're gonna be all right." I started classes around the same time. Online, part-time, at first just to prove to myself I could. I'd do my coursework after Lily fell asleep, laptop balanced on the edge of Doris's old dining table, fingers flying over the keys while a baby monitor hummed softly nearby. Doris cheered me on like I was running for president. "Smart girls raise smart babies," she'd say, passing me a mug of tea as she rocked Lily in her arms. "Go make us proud." We moved out of Doris's bungalow when Lily turned 2. Not because we wanted to, but because it was time. We found a small rental house nearby, one with peeling paint and uneven floors, but a backyard full of dandelions and just enough space for a plastic kiddie pool in summer. We painted Lily's room yellow and hung glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. She called it her sunshine cave. And in that house, something happened. We found rhythm. Our days had structure. Mornings were full of cereal spills and Dora the Explorer. Evenings were textbooks and budget spreadsheets and shared meals cooked one pot at a time. On Fridays, Brandon brought home pizza and let Lily sit on his shoulders while they danced around the living room. We had no fancy vacations, no new cars. Our idea of luxury was a Sunday drive to the farmer's market or a thrift store score on a gently used stroller. But it was ours. Brandon built a makeshift porch swing from scrap wood one summer, and I remember watching Lily curl up in it beside him, cheeks sticky from watermelon, her laughter bubbling out into the soft evening air. "You ever think about how far we've come?" I asked him one night, sitting beside him on the swing after she'd gone to bed. He nodded slowly. "Every single day." That fall, I finished my degree. I walked the stage in a borrowed cap and gown. My name called over the tinny speaker system in the auditorium of a community college I'd never stepped foot in until that day. Brandon was front row, holding Lily on his hip, her tiny hand waving at me like I was a celebrity. Doris was there too, of course, wearing a blouse she'd ironed twice and clapping louder than anyone else in the building. Afterward, she pulled me aside and placed something small in my palm, a silver charm shaped like an open book. "My sister gave me this when I graduated high school," she said. "Told me it was for women who kept writing their story, no matter who tried to take the pen away." I clutched it so tightly I left an imprint on my skin. That night, we celebrated on our front porch with a homemade cake and paper lanterns Brandon and Lily had hung up while I was getting ready. No speeches, no fancy dinner, just us. And it was enough, more than enough. We didn't have a picture-perfect life. We still had bills that stressed us out and mornings when we overslept and forgot to thaw dinner. But we also had bedtime stories. I love yous shouted from bathroom doors and Friday dance parties in the kitchen. Every inch of it had been earned. And as Lily grew, talkative, clever, unafraid, I saw in her the life I had dreamed of in the hospital room on that rainy March night. A life built not on approval from others, but on love freely chosen. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The kind of morning where the sun filters through the curtains just right, and the house smells like leftover coffee and laundry soap. Lily had just started 3rd grade and left a trail of toast crumbs and glitter markers on the table before racing out the door with Brandon. I had poured myself a 2nd cup of tea and was about to call Doris down for breakfast. She hadn't come into the kitchen yet, which wasn't like her. She was always the first one awake, usually humming some hymn from memory as she fixed eggs and toast for whoever needed feeding. I carried the mug up the stairs, still warm in my hands. Her door was cracked open. Quiet. Still, I knocked softly. "Doris, breakfast is ready." No answer. When I stepped inside, she looked so peaceful I thought she was just napping. The quilt she'd sewn herself was pulled up to her chest, a Bible open on her lap, glasses still resting on the bridge of her nose. Her hands were folded, her mouth lifted into a faint, knowing smile. My breath caught in my throat. I set the tea down carefully, like I could still wake her if I just spoke gently enough. "Doris!" But she was gone. I sat on the edge of her bed and held her hand for a long time, not ready to let go even as the truth settled around me like dust. It wasn't dramatic. There was no struggle, no sirens, no last-minute goodbyes, just a quiet leaving, a life completed. The funeral was small. She had requested it that way, no grand speeches, just a soft send-off in the chapel she'd attended since her own childhood. Brandon and I picked out her favorite hymn, "It Is Well With My Soul," and Lily insisted on placing a bundle of lavender on the casket. "She always smelled like this," she whispered to me. "Like peace." Neighbors came. Church ladies with warm eyes and casseroles. A few retired coworkers. The mailman. The pharmacist from the store where she used to pick up her prescriptions. People who knew her simply as Miss Doris. Gentle, steady, kind. And then near the back of the chapel I saw them, my parents. I knew them instantly, though they looked older now, smaller. My mother wore a gray coat too heavy for the season. My father had a cane I didn't remember. They stood stiffly among strangers, eyes flicking toward the front, never settling on me. They didn't approach. Not before, not after. Just hovered near the edge of the grief like people who'd wandered into the wrong story. And I let them. Brandon saw them too. His hand found mine during the final hymn and gave it a quiet squeeze. No words passed between us. I didn't cry during the service. Not because I wasn't heartbroken. I was. But because something in me knew Doris wouldn't want her memory buried under weeping. She'd want laughter and legacy. She'd want Lily to remember the way she braided her hair and slipped little peppermint candies into her backpack for emergencies. At home that evening, I found Lily in her room, sitting cross-legged on the floor surrounded by picture books and a box of Doris's costume jewelry. "I miss her already," she said, her voice soft. I sank to the carpet beside her. "Me too." "She's still here, though," Lily whispered, patting her heart. "You always said love doesn't go away." I nodded, eyes brimming. "That's right, love stays even when people don't." That night, as I tucked her into bed, Lily looked up at me with those wide, curious eyes that had somehow already seen more than they should. "Will we still live here?" "Yes," I said, brushing her hair back. "This is our home." But it was Grandma Doris's. It still is. She built it for us even if she's not here now. And in the quiet, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to fully feel before. Doris hadn't just given us shelter. She'd given us a blueprint for how to love. For how to hold space when no one else would. For how to start over, even when life tried to close every door. She had said yes to me when my own family said no. And now, it was my turn to carry that forward. The house felt too quiet after the funeral. No teapot whistling from the kitchen. No shuffling slippers on the hallway tile. just silence, thick and unrelenting. I kept expecting to hear Doris humming from the garden or calling out that someone had left the porch light on again. But each room stood still, like the whole house was holding its breath. That evening, I couldn't make dinner. Brandon offered to pick up Chinese, and I nodded numbly. He and Lily left together, giving me space I didn't ask for but desperately needed. I found myself in Lily's room, standing in the doorway. It still smelled like crayons and kid shampoo and the faintest trace of baby powder. The room hadn't changed much since she was small. Same pale yellow walls, same shelf of bedtime books, now mostly unread but still familiar. And I just sank, right there on the carpet like my legs had finally given up. My arms wrapped around my knees, forehead pressed against them, sobs crawling up my throat like they'd been waiting for days. I cried for Doris, of course, for the woman who had taken me in, never once asked me to prove myself, and stitched a life back together from scraps I thought couldn't be saved. But I also cried for every version of me that had felt unworthy of that kind of love. For the teenage girl who stood on her parents' porch in the rain, duffel bag in hand, hoping someone would chase after her. No one ever did, except Doris. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I felt the carpet shift beside me. Lily. She didn't say anything at first, just sat cross-legged beside me, quiet and steady in her favorite striped pajamas, her hair still damp from the bath Brandon must have given her. Then, after a minute, she leaned her head against my shoulder. "I'm glad you have me," she said. That did it. The rest of the tears came fast and messy, my arms instinctively pulling her close, her small body melting into mine like she had when she was just a baby. Only now she wasn't a baby. She was a little person with opinions and ideas and this shocking, beautiful ability to see me even when I tried to disappear. "I miss her so much," I whispered. "I know," Lily said. "Me too." We sat there, the two of us, surrounded by drawings taped to the walls and a forgotten Lego under my leg. It was strangely perfect. "I used to think love meant staying even when it hurt," I told her. "Even when people didn't treat you right. Is that what your mom did to you?" She asked, not with bitterness but curiosity. I took a breath. "Yeah, I think she didn't know how to love without conditions. Doris taught me different." "She didn't make us earn it," Lily said. "She just gave it." Exactly. She just gave it. We ended up lying on the floor, our fingers tracing imaginary shapes in the ceiling. I told her stories about Doris, not the sad parts, but the funny ones. Like how she once scared off a door-to-door salesman by pretending she was casting a spell. Or how she hid chocolate bars in her knitting basket and swore they were just for emergencies. Lily giggled, and the sound made my heart ache and heal at the same time. Before bed, she pulled a framed photo of Doris off her dresser, the one where they're both laughing, cheeks pressed together, and set it on her windowsill. "Now she can see the stars," she said. I kissed her forehead. "She'd love that." After she fell asleep, I stood in the hallway and looked back at the room. It struck me then, this house didn't feel empty. It felt held. Not by things, not even by memories, but by the love Doris had woven into every corner of it. The love Lily and I now carried forward. The kind you don't have to earn. The kind that outlives you. Maybe grief is love without a place to go, but I had somewhere to pour mine. Into Lily, into this home, into the quiet comfort of knowing that from the ashes of rejection I had built something solid, something whole. It was one of those golden fall afternoons, warm enough for short sleeves, cool enough for tea. I had just finished raking leaves into messy piles for Lily to jump in later when I heard the knock. 3 slow raps, firm, unfamiliar. I wiped my hands on my jeans, heart already thudding with that primal instinct we all have, the sense that something is about to change. Brandon opened the door first, and then froze. I stepped beside him, peeking around his shoulder. My parents stood on the porch. Older, grayer, smaller somehow. My mother wore a faded blue coat and clutched a wrinkled tissue like it was armor. My father leaned on a cane, his mouth pressed into the same stubborn line I remembered from childhood. Neither one met my eyes at first. My voice was ice. "What are you doing here?" My mother cleared her throat. "Emily, we didn't know if we should come. But your brothers moved to California. Your father's business went under during the pandemic. We lost the house." Brandon's jaw tightened beside me. "We don't want anything from you," my father added quickly, which only made me more suspicious. We were hoping to meet our granddaughter before it's too late. There it was, not regret, not apology, just timing. I couldn't speak. Brandon, always the calmer of us, said carefully, "She's not here, she's at a friend S." It was a lie. Lily was inside, probably playing with her art kit in the living room, but I didn't correct him. My mother looked up then, eyes shining. "Please, Emily, we made mistakes. We didn't handle things well, but we think about you all the time, about her." I stared at them. Two people who had once told me I'd brought shame to the family just for being honest, who cast me out without a cent, without a blanket, without a backward glance. And now they were on my porch, shivering like ghosts, asking for warmth. "I don't know what you want me to say," I said quietly. My father took a breath, clearly struggling to find the words. "We were wrong about a lot of things we didn't understand. We were scared. You were cruel." The words hung there, and no one rushed to deny them. I could feel Brandon's hand twitch at his side, ready to step in if I needed him. But I didn't, because something was shifting inside me. A line I hadn't known was still blurred was now drawn with sharp clarity. I stepped forward, just enough so they could see me fully. "You had your chance," I said. "You could have come to the hospital when she was born. You could have knocked when we were living in that little rental house. You could have sent a card, a call, anything." My mother's lip trembled. "But you didn't," I continued. "You stayed silent for 8 years, and now that your lives have collapsed, you show up." I paused. Let them feel the weight of that silence. "I won't let you into her life just because yours fell apart." Brandon placed a hand on my back. My voice never wavered. "You threw me away," I said. "And you don't get to pick up the pieces just because you finally realize what you lost." They said nothing. My father looked down. My mother clutched her tissue tighter. I didn't cry, not this time. I stepped back and closed the door, quietly, firmly. No slamming, no screaming, just a final, absolute choice. On the other side of the door, I heard footsteps retreating down the porch stairs. Inside, Lily peeked around the hallway corner. Who was that? I knelt beside her and smoothed her hair behind her ear. "Just people from the past," I said, "looking for something they already gave up." She nodded, not needing more than that. Then she grabbed my hand. "Come help me pick the good leaves," she said, "for our scrapbook." I followed her outside, into the golden light, into the future I'd built. Teenagehood arrived like a slow tide, quiet but impossible to ignore. Lily traded stuffed animals for notebooks, bedtime stories for music playlists, and Saturday cartoons for debates at the kitchen table. At 13, she'd already decided she wanted to be a journalist. Not the flashy kind on TV, but the kind who dug deep. "I want to find truths," she said one morning over oatmeal, spoon waving for emphasis. She was in 8th grade when the school assigned a genealogy project. One of those trace your roots, things meant to get kids talking to their elders. That night she came home, dropped her backpack with a thud, and said casually, "Mom, I need to ask you about your side of the family." I felt it in my spine before she even finished the sentence. She sat across from me, pencil already poised over a worksheet. "So Grandma Doris was your husband's grandma, right? But what about your parents?" I froze, just for a second. It had been years since I'd said their names out loud. "Do I have grandparents on your side?" I set down my tea. Her face was open. Curious, not accusatory. I could have dodged it, could have offered vague answers or changed the subject. But she was 13 now, and I had promised myself long ago that when she started asking, I would meet her questions with truth, not bitterness. "Yes," I said quietly. "You do," she blinked. "Where are they?" "They're alive, as far as I know." She waited, so I told her, not all at once, not every cruel word, but the shape of it, the facts. How I told my parents I was pregnant at 19 and they told me to leave. How I had nowhere to go until Brandon and Doris took me in. How we built a life from nothing, not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Lily's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. "They didn't want you?" she asked. I took a breath. "No, not at the time. And when they finally showed up again, years later, it wasn't to apologize. It was because their lives had fallen apart." "Did they try to meet me?" "Yes." But I said no. She was quiet for a long time. Then, with that careful, serious tone she used when she was trying to be grown, she said, "You protected me." I nodded, my voice thick. "That's what moms do." She scribbled something on her worksheet, then paused. "Can I still put them in my family tree?" Of course, I said. You get to decide what your tree looks like. But I want to put Doris at the top, she added. She's the root. She's the one who made us grow. Tears stung my eyes, but I smiled. She'd love that. We spent the rest of the evening sifting through photo albums. Lily taped pictures into her project board, baby snapshots of herself with Brandon, a Polaroid of Doris teaching her how to knit, and one of me in my graduation cap, holding Lily on my hip like a diploma of my own. You never seemed angry growing up, Lily said at one point. I shrugged. I had reasons to be, but being angry all the time, it steals too much joy. Do you miss them? She asked. I didn't answer right away. Sometimes I miss the idea of them, I finally said. The version of them I used to wish for. Lily nodded slowly, taking it in. That night, after she went to bed, I lingered at the kitchen table, looking at the project board she'd left behind. A hand-drawn tree in green marker stretched across the cardboard, roots curling beneath it. At the very top, in bold letters, she had written, "Family is who shows up." And beneath it, her branches, Doris, Brandon, me, a new legacy, not born from blood, but from choice. 15 came fast. 1 minute she was missing teeth and begging for one more bedtime story, and the next, she was taller than me when she wore boots and suddenly knew how to apply eyeliner better than I ever had. Her birthday fell on a Friday, just after the last bell of the school year. We threw her a backyard party. Nothing fancy, just string lights, music, and her closest friends huddled around a fire pit roasting marshmallows. Brandon grilled hot dogs. I made her favorite chocolate cake with raspberry filling. She laughed so freely that night, all teeth and dimples, her whole face glowing in the flicker of candles. I thought we were in the clear, until the guests had gone and we were curled up on the porch swing, just the two of us, the stars blinking quietly above us. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I need to ask you something, she said, my body stilled. Okay, she took a breath, steady and certain. I want to meet them, your parents. The words didn't fall like a bomb, they landed softly, but the impact was the same. I stared straight ahead. The wind rustled the oak tree in the yard. A dog barked faintly down the street. I want to know where I come from, she added quickly. Not because I think they deserve me, but because I deserve to understand. There was no defiance in her tone, no teenage rebellion, just clarity, and it broke me. I'm not asking you to be okay with it, she continued. And I'm not saying I want a relationship, I just want to see their faces, once. She looked up at me. Can I? My throat tightened. The words got stuck somewhere between reason and memory. I wanted to protect her, but I also knew I couldn't shield her forever, and she wasn't a child anymore. I met her eyes. If we do this, you don't go alone. I don't want to, she said. I want you with me. I nodded slowly. Okay. A single word, and it felt like a chapter closing and another beginning. Brandon was hesitant when we told him later, understandably so. He had stood beside me when I shut that door years ago, but he didn't object, just looked at Lily with a seriousness he rarely used. If either of you feel uncomfortable at any point, he said, you walk out. No explanations needed. She agreed. We didn't reach out right away. I took a few days to sit with it, to talk it through with Brandon, to remind myself that allowing this didn't mean erasing everything that had happened. It just meant owning it. I sent the message through an old email address I wasn't even sure still worked. 3 sentences. No warmth, just information. Lily has asked to meet you. One time. On our terms. If you agree, we'll meet at Cafe Rose next Sunday at 3. They replied within the hour. We'll be there. Lily didn't smile when I told her. She just nodded, like someone who knew what it meant to open a door that had long been nailed shut. The days leading up to the meeting were quiet. She didn't ask me what she should wear or how she should act. She didn't practice what to say. But I could see it in her eyes. She was building a shield. And me? I wasn't afraid of them hurting me anymore. I was afraid of them disappointing her. Because for 15 years, I had fought to protect Lily from the rot of rejection, from the cruelty of conditional love, from the empty ache of people who love only when it's convenient. And now, she was choosing to look those ghosts in the face. All I could do was stand beside her and make sure she walked out with her head high. Cafe Rose was quiet that afternoon. Muted sunlight filtered through lace curtains, casting soft patterns onto the worn wood tables. The place smelled like cinnamon scones and old coffee, a comfort somehow. We arrived 10 minutes early. Lily wore a simple blue dress and a denim jacket. She didn't look nervous. She looked prepared. I, on the other hand, could barely breathe. I scanned the room out of instinct, heart racing like it was prom night or a job interview or a storm about to roll in. And then I saw them. They were already seated in the far corner. My mother had her hands folded around a mug. My father sat stiffly beside her, his cane propped against the chair, eyes on the table like it might give him courage. Lily spotted them at the same time I did. She didn't hesitate. I followed her across the cafe, each step landing heavier than the last. "Hello," she said, her voice calm but unwavering. They stood. My mother's eyes filled the moment she saw Lily. "You look so much like your mom." My father nodded, throat bobbing. "It's good to meet you, Lily." She nodded politely. "You too." She sat. Remained standing. I needed that edge, that power. My mother looked up at me, her face pinched with emotion. "Emily, let's not pretend we're here for you," I said, voice cool. "This isn't your moment." Lily shifted slightly, glancing toward me, then back to them. "I wanted to meet you because I needed to see it for myself. The people who gave up my mom." The words hit like glass cracking. My father opened his mouth, but Lily raised her hand. "I don't want excuses," she said. "Just tell me." "Why?" My mother blinked, clearly not prepared for this version of her granddaughter. "We were scared," she said. "Young girls having babies, it wasn't what we wanted for her." "And what did you want?" Lily asked. "A daughter who lied, one who hid her life just to keep your approval." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. My mother's lips trembled. "We thought we were doing what was right." "You weren't," I said flatly. My father looked up at me finally. "We know that now." There it was. The apology, years too late. I stared at them. Two people who had once slammed a door in my face without looking back. Now old, fragile, staring up at the woman I became despite them. Lily looked to me. My turn. I leaned forward slightly, every word deliberate. "You didn't just lose 15 years with her," I said. "You lost every right to be called her family." My mother's mouth parted. I kept going. "When I stood on your porch, pregnant and terrified, you told me I was a disgrace. You didn't offer a hand or even a question. You just sent me away. You don't get to rewrite that now." My father's eyes brimmed. "We regret it every day." "That's not enough," I said, silence. Lily reached for my hand, and then I stood straighter. "You want closure, this is it. You met her, you saw what you missed, and now we're leaving." My mother tried to speak again, but I didn't wait. Lily rose beside me, tall and unflinching. We walked out without looking back. Outside, the air was cool. A breeze tugged at Lily's hair. She took a breath. "That was a lot." "You okay?" I asked, turning to her. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I just closed a door I didn't even realize was still open." I squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you," she smiled. "I'm proud of you too." And just like that, we walked toward the car, lighter, cleaner, and free. No ghosts trailing behind, only each other. That night, the house felt heavier than usual, but not in a bad way. More like the kind of weight you feel after carrying something far too long and finally setting it down. My feet were sore. My heart too full of things I hadn't named yet. Brandon didn't ask questions when we came home. Just met us at the door, wrapped me in his arms, and whispered, "You did good." Later, after dinner and showers and a moment alone on the porch swing, Lily found me in the living room. She held something behind her back. "I made something," she said, almost shy. I looked up from the couch, curious. She stepped closer and revealed it, a framed photo of Doris, the one we'd taken the summer Lily turned 7. They were sitting side by side in the garden, dirt on their knees, sun in their smiles. Below the photo, on a piece of cream cardstock, Lily had written neatly, purposefully, "The woman who said yes when others said no." My throat closed up. "Oh, Lily," she handed it to me with care. "I thought it should go on the wall, like not just in our memories. Like really part of the house." I blinked back tears. "Where do you want it?" She walked to the hallway, right outside her bedroom door, in the center of the wall we passed a dozen times a day. "Here," she said, "so she can still see us growing." I helped her hang it. The nails went in crooked and we had to straighten it twice, but when it finally sat just right, we both stepped back in silence. There she was, still here, watching over the life she helped stitch together from scraps. Lily looped her arm through mine. "I'm really glad you didn't let them back in." I glanced at her. "Even though you wanted to meet them," she nodded. I needed to, but that doesn't mean I want them in our life. I have you, that's enough. A tear slipped down my cheek, but I didn't hide it. You're everything I ever hoped to build, Lily. And you did, she said simply. With love, not fear. We sat on the hallway floor for a while, under the photo, the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of old pipes filling the silence like a lullaby. I thought of Doris, of her quiet wisdom, her fierce gentleness, the way she always seemed to know exactly what I needed before I knew myself. I thought of how she looked at Lily like she was watching a miracle unfold. And then I thought of myself. 19, trembling, clutching a duffel bag on the front porch of the only home I'd ever known, cast out with nothing but a name and a heartbeat. And now I had this, a child who chose truth, a partner who never wavered, a house that echoed with laughter and spilled glitter and too loud music on Saturday mornings. I ran my fingers over the frame again. The woman who said yes when others said no. Doris had opened the door. Brandon had held it wide. And I had walked through it. Shaking, yes, but forward, always forward. College came faster than I was ready for. Move-in day was a blur of boxes, twin XL sheets, and tearful hugs that I tried to keep from turning into full sobs. Lily, of course, was composed, eager, confident, standing in the middle of her dorm room like she already belonged there, like she'd been ready for this moment her whole life. And maybe she had. Text me when you're settled, I said, smoothing a wrinkle from her bedspread even though she was already laughing at me. I will. And call if you need help with anything, seriously, even if it's just laundry. Mom, she grinned, I've got this. I pulled her into one last hug, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, the same kind she'd used since middle school. Then I let her go, and just like that, she was off. A few weeks later, she called one night, not to cry or ask for laundry tips, but just to talk. Her roommate had gone home for the weekend, and she'd stayed behind to catch up on reading. We talked about classes, her journalism professor, the weird food in the dining hall. And then she said, I told my pseudomates about Doris today. Oh, they were talking about grandmothers and recipes and weird holiday traditions. One of them said she never really knew her grandma, and I said I had one. She wasn't the typical kind. I smiled into the phone. She took us in when no one else would. She sang lullabies off-key and made the best apple pie and taught me how to stand tall without saying much, and she believed in my mom when everyone else gave up on her. Her voice softened. They asked me if she was my mom's mom. I said no, but in every way that mattered, yes. I didn't say anything for a moment. I couldn't. My chest was too full. She still hangs in the hallway, Lily continued.